Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Dirty Martini. I hope you're doing well and I hope you're having an amazing day. I just want to bring your attention to something which is extremely important to me, and it is the fact that this is the 50th episode of Dirty Martini, which is just a crazy concept to perceive. 50, 50, this is half a century. I mean, not really, because it's been barely a year, but 50. Who would have thought? So here's to 50 more, and after that to 50 more, and after that to 250 more. I love creating this podcast. It brings me so much joy, and the fact that there is 50 hours of me talking online is concerning. Sometimes when I think about it, it terrifies me and keeps me up at night, but it is also something I'm extremely proud of because it is a testament that I just never shut up. What was the thing that Miley said? Like, I can talk to myself for hours. Yeah, I think I embody this through and through. And when I started this podcast, I did not start it with the intention to reach 50 episodes or 100 episodes or like just any X amount of episodes. I started this with the intention to have fun, and just this consistency and this big of a number is so cool. And we're only just getting started. So shout out to myself. I remember when I reached 20, like the 20th episode, I was talking to a friend and we were both like, oh my God, like that is so many episodes. And it is when you think about it. But here is to so much more to come. And also the first birthday of this podcast is quickly approaching. And I want to celebrate it properly with you. So you can follow me on Instagram at Dirty Martini Pod to stay informed on what I plan. So yeah. The 50th episode, I wanted to commemorate by focusing on something that has been taking up a lot of mental space in my head the last year. And it is something I have briefly touched upon in some episodes. Well, I feel like in almost every episode. But I have been focusing more on the negative side of it. So today I want to flip the switch. Maybe it can also benefit some of you who maybe gave power to Valentine's Day couples to make you feel miserable and lonely. I will be your Valentine every year for all years until an asteroid hits the Earth. And after that, I will be, you know what? We have a lot to get through today, so I'll just keep this brief. I know a lot of times in passing I mentioned loneliness, and loneliness is something I will touch upon today, but I'm not going to be painting it in sad gray colors. I'm actually going to paint loneliness here as the opportunity to taste solitude, to achieve self-sufficiency, and perceive freedom. And by switching this narrative, I hope to inspire you to not see loneliness as punishment and perhaps even social embarrassment, but as an opportunity to grow, to connect to yourself, and to see it as an opportunity to get to know yourself. Because if you're like me, you have no clue who you are. So getting to know yourself is a key aspect of our existence, I would imagine, and finding joy in this process of getting to know yourself, making time for this. And I think it's just something we should be doing and appreciating the opportunity to do instead of seeing it as punishment. Instead of seeing our solitude as isolation, we can perhaps put in the effort to see the value of quality time spent alone. And I hope this episode inspires you to maybe try out something you thought was socially unacceptable. I'm not talking about crime. Please don't commit crime. Or maybe I will encourage you to spend time with the voices in your head, which I know can be daunting, which I know can be extremely depressing, but if you befriend them, or even if it's not possible to befriend them, if you recognize that those voices are not you, then my mission here is accomplished. Also, I feel like this could be an extremely important episode for me personally because I have been going through a lot. I have been going through a lot with the loneliness I've been experiencing recently. And by recently, I would say I'm talking about the last 6 months. And I would say this is because it's a new type of loneliness, and I have talked about this before. It is an entirely new spectrum of emotions of the loneliness field and of this layer of existence, because I'm in the same space geographically, like physically, but nothing is the same. I am not the same. And this has been feeling extremely isolating. And as I've mentioned multiple times, I am struggling to connect with people. I am struggling to click with people. And this can be very discouraging because, first of all, nobody talks about how difficult it is to make friends in your 20s when you're no longer bound by the same classes or by work, because there is distinction between colleagues and friends. And I would love to explore this in a future episode, but now let's stick to the topic. So this lack of narrative sometimes makes me feel like I'm made from a broken mold, because everyone seems to be able to connect to people so easily, and yet here I am. And second of all, we are social beings by nature, and connection to others is what we have built our society on. And I love talking to people, but the thing is, sometimes, and sometimes by choice, sometimes by external factors, I am only entitled to my own company. And this is something which I used to be terrified of, but because of the way I approached this thing when it first started infiltrating my existence at the level it has been going on, I have come to crave my own presence rather than try to avoid it. But all of this again sounds so extremely vague and abstract and not concrete at all. So I say let's just, without further ado, after this 10-minute introduction, let's just get straight into it. Basically, let me tell you the story of how I perceived myself as not being my type, and then put in the effort to either become my type or just see myself as my type. Let's just get into it, guys. So again, what I will try to do today is establish a storyline, so to call it, of the environment in which I nourish this solitude and how it came to be, instances which were extremely vivid, and then what this thing has taught me. Because there is no denying, I have learned a plethora about myself and about the world I live in from the people I share my life with, but I cannot begin to explain. Today I will try to begin to explain the extremely life-changing lessons I came to learn from spending time all by myself and perceiving myself as an integral part of my life and not as someone who is just there and I have to put up with. So let's start by setting the scene and then moving to the more concrete stuff that I've experienced and the extremely, I would say, valuable lessons I have come to reap from all of this. Okay, why is it important to do things alone? Life is seasonal. And in certain seasons, I have had a lot of friends. And in others, I have been alone. And currently, I am experiencing the latter. After we graduated from our bachelors, my friends either left the country or they moved to a different city, And I have been I've been struggling a lot with making new friends in both university and work and beyond both of those realms of my existence in my day-to-day life. And I don't know if it is because I struggle to click with people because we don't have things in common, or because I have subconsciously closed myself off from the world because I am still clinging on to the past. And actually, the latter is very much a possibility because I tend to have these mental blocks and predispositions wherever I go, whoever I meet. My self-perceptions precede me. Now, what do I mean by this? So when I moved here first in 2021, I had convinced myself that nobody would like me. I unlocked a new level of self-deprecation and self-doubting because I no longer knew who I was. I was not in the country, not in the culture, not in the environment in which I grew up in. And while this can be extremely freeing because you can be whoever you want to be, for me, it just equated to being hectic and chaotic because I had not a single idea. I didn't have a blip of a concept of who I was or who I wanted to be. And I cannot begin to explain to you what an identity crisis graduating from high school was, because in a matter of 2 to 3 months, my entire existence, the way I knew it, no longer was. To this day, this remains the biggest change I have underwent. I no longer was in school. I was no longer sitting on the same desk with the girl I shared my last 12 years with. My friends were moving to different cities. I moved to a different country. I was in the last year of my teenage years, and I, back then, perceived this as the end of my childhood for whatever reason, because, ultimately, I closed a very big chapter. Well, there are many aspects of my life back then which forced me to grow up extremely fast. So I technically, or at least mentally, felt like I was no longer a child. Now, the thing is, it's really interesting that currently I feel more like a child than I did when I was 19 or 20. I don't know how that works, but it is true. I feel more connected to my childhood self now because now I am no longer in a rush or rushed to grow up. And in fact, if I could go back, maybe I would. I don't know. But my point is, in 2 months, I graduated from high school. I parted ways with my friends. I left my family. I met new friends. I moved countries all by myself. I met new people. I no longer lived with my family. I lived with 8 strangers. Nothing was the way I had known. Culture, environment, geography, mentality, emotional environment, and so on and so forth. Everything was different. And also, this was still pandemic-y times. So, the world itself started to slowly open back up, and nothing was the same it was the way it was pre-pandemic because we weren't the same. And the pandemic started when I was 17, and I am turning 23 next month. So the thing is, I knew nothing. I knew nobody, and I didn't know myself. But the thing is, despite this lack of knowledge, I was convinced, and I convinced myself that I knew one thing for certain, and that is that nobody would like me. So when I came here and started to settle, a lot of the times I would just purposefully isolate myself from my flatmates and classmates because I had convinced myself that I am not likable. Maybe that is because I didn't like myself. And my classmates would hang out together in the break between lectures. They would go for a cigarette together. And don't smoke, guys, don't smoke. But, like the very Western Europeanness. I mean, like, actually, I've seen more people smoke in Eastern Europe than in Western Europe. Doesn't matter. Let's not make it geopolitical. Basically, they would just hang out together in the break. And I would just sit in my chair waiting for the break to be over. And I remember feeling so pathetic. And I would have an anxiety attack anytime I felt like saying hi to somebody. And looking back, I don't think I was pathetic, even though that is the way I perceived myself back then. I just think I was a scared little child in a new environment with nobody to turn to, just wanting to have somebody to talk to. And it took a lot of time for me to warm up to people and actually let them see me and let them be my friend. Because I had this problem of comparing everyone to my friends back home. I was looking for the known, for the familiar, in an uncharted territory. And while I can understand why I was doing it, because it was a self-protecting mechanism, it was still very much detrimental to my social life and my personal well-being, because I would blame people. I mean, not out loud, of course, but I would blame people for not being like my friends and family back home. So, sure, there was pain caused by external factors, but a lot of my pain was self-inflicted. And I realized it perhaps a bit too late to prevent it, but I am happy that I realized it now, and maybe in the future I can try to prevent it. Because this was extremely unfair to them and to myself, because it was preventing my growth, because I refused to leave the mental comfort. But the thing is, I was no longer in my physical comfort zone. Also, later I had an extremely vivid crisis about where I belong, where my comfort zone is. There's so many things people don't tell you about moving abroad by yourself when you're still so young. Nobody warns you about these difficulties you come across along the way, so you're not expecting to face them. You expect everything to be rainbows and flowers, but nobody talks about what happens after sunset. Moving abroad offers you a lot of reasons, and learning to tame your loneliness, to turn it from a curse to a blessing, is definitely one of them. It is perhaps one of the biggest takeaways I've had so far. Because you go somewhere, you don't know anyone, and ultimately, until you make friends, you're forced to be alone. And I have always lived with people, and that is still the case, but now it is different, because moving here meant that I would be living with strangers. And if you've ever had to do something similar, you know that there is no more pronounced loneliness than the one you experience in a room full of people. So, circumstantially, I was forced to be alone a lot. And at first, I saw this as a curse, as a burden, because I had never been alone in that capacity. At home, I always had my family and friends. I had my known places. I had my known self, or at least I had a very familiar perception of who I was. And I came here and absolutely nothing was the same, me included. Again, at first I was trying to find substitutes and correlations, but that just brought a lot of pain, because it showed me that nothing is the same nor replicable. However, what this ultimately taught me is that the people I have in my life are irreplaceable. And this allowed me to feel gratitude for things I used to take for granted. So there are many things loneliness can teach you. To, for example, be grateful for the people you had or have. And it ultimately forces you to spend a lot of time with yourself, by yourself. And I personally, and I'm extremely proud of this, but I personally chose to implement this in a way to become a person I love spending time with. I never wanted to be left alone with my thoughts because they were mean, and it took me feeling like I was on a deserted island to build a home from the ruins of my soul. Because over the years, I used to act in such a self-destructive way that at the end, I left myself in shambles. And I hated myself for it. And it took a lot of self-hatred to practice self-love. And despite all the self-inflicted pain throughout the years, I learned to forgive myself and grow in love with myself. Not in a narcissistic way. I mean, maybe to a little bit of like an extent in a narcissistic way, but in a way in which I became such a core person in my life, which I know sounds so stupid because it is so obvious, but I used to never prioritize myself. And I used to do things in spite of what I wanted or needed. I learned to care for myself and accept myself. And that wasn't an easy journey, and it still is an ongoing journey because sometimes I revert back to factory settings. But one of the things which helped me achieve this was spending time by myself. You have to learn to be alone. There is literally no other way. I'm really sorry, but there isn't. And up until 2022, I was never prioritizing myself and what I wanted and what I needed. I was always an afterthought, if I was even a thought that I thought. Then I experienced a terrible heartbreak. And this heartbreak taught me so much. This is perhaps one of the pains in my life that I've been extremely grateful for, even though it ruined me. At the time, it ruined me, but I just, from the tears I wept, I used them to water the soil of my self-growth. Because back then, I had put this person on a pedestal. I gave them the power to define me. And I was defining myself through our relationship. To me, that person was a constant. And I could never even think about a day they wouldn't be in my life. Until they no longer were. And I no longer had someone who knew all my ins and outs and loved them. Because I didn't love them. I didn't even accept them. Sometimes I even refused to acknowledge them. And there are many things that this heartbreak taught me, but the most important lesson was that the only constant person in my life, the only person who is guaranteed to be in my life until my very last breath is me. And back then, that was not someone I necessarily wanted in my life. But what happened is that I chose to choose her. I chose to give her a chance. And I spent a lot of time with her. I got to know her. And that is why I have become so extremely in tune with what I think and how I feel. Because I chose to perceive her as me rather than a stranger that I am chained to. I chose to befriend her and I chose to learn to love her. And it took me realizing that I am the person I am going to spend my entire life with to actually accept myself and from there learn to love myself. It took me being left with myself, stripped down from the love I was giving to others, to start giving it to myself. So once I realized that a lot of my pain was self-inflicted and was given the opportunity to learn from that experience, I took it. I wanted to make things right, whatever right meant at the time, if right was even something that existed. So when I moved to the UK, I told myself that I am seeing this as an opportunity to correct my mistakes from my first year in the Netherlands and to see if I had learned my lesson. I made it abundantly clear to myself that I am not moving to a different country with the mentality of nobody is going to like me. So I went there with the intention to be a social butterfly. And I did not succeed. I failed miserably. But this time, it wasn't self-inflicted. In every single lecture, I would sit next to a different person and I would spark up a conversation. I would go to social events. I would go to gym classes. I even joined Bumble BFF. I was so hungry for friendships and connections. And sure, I did end up meeting two girls, one of them from my spinning class and the other from Bumble BFF. And we would hang out every now and then, but those friendships, they did not last. We haven't spoken since I left. And that is okay. Not every relationship and friendship is meant to last a lifetime. Life is seasonal, and sometimes people are too. And it took me doing conventionally communal things alone to unlock these understandings that I have now. And the thing is, when I moved to the Netherlands and I had this mindset of nobody likes me, it's so vivid in my memory, it's like it happened yesterday. So I would walk down the street and just look down at my feet because I didn't want anyone to see my face. I didn't want anyone to perceive me. I was so scared that they would sense my fear and my insecurities. And I just did not want to be a burden because my entire life, I had always perceived myself as a burden because I was too afraid to be authentic and take up space, even though I was loud. And man, was I loud. And those things, doing things you're supposed to be doing with others, but doing them by yourself, that is daunting. It is very, very scary because at first it makes you feel like it emphasizes your loneliness and lack of friendships. You think that everyone cares and everyone judges, and sure, some do, but most people don't care if you live or die. And the thing is, what really changed things for me was when I started going to concerts and going to concerts alone. Because my friends, for example, they didn't like the same musicians as me, or they didn't want to see them live, or they couldn't get a ticket. But the thing is, I was working my ass off. I was waiting on ungrateful people until 6 a.m. and I knew I wanted to reward myself. And here's the thing. I realized that just because someone doesn't want to join me, that doesn't mean I don't have to do it. What was it that Lana Del Rey said? If you dance, I'll dance, and if you don't, I'll dance anyway. Because, for instance, I really wanted to go see Post Malone, but none of my friends did, and I knew I would regret not going. So I swallowed my pride and my ego, and I went alone. Actually, yeah, that's true. Like, the very first concert I went alone to was Post Malone's concert in Amsterdam in 2023. But by that point, I had gone to some sort of social events alone, but never to a concert. And I was very, very, very anxious because I thought that everyone would know that I'm there alone and that they would actually care. And I thought that I would be given a scarlet letter and I would have to wear it as a chain that is weighing me down. And I cannot begin to explain to you the stress I felt. Because at that point, I had already made friends. I had a pretty colorful and wide social circle here. But why was I alone? And at first I thought about not going to the concert because why would I go alone? But then I thought about it and I was like, why not? Why would I let someone else's lack of interest, for example, stop me from doing the things I am interested in? This is something I have been dreaming of forever, and I have worked hard to be able to afford to go. So why am I stopping myself? And at that concert, I was very awkward in the sense that I didn't know how to act because it was my first ever big concert and I had a seat and I didn't know if I'm allowed to stand up and dance and sing. I just didn't know the etiquette. So I talked to the people around me and they were just as awkward and just as clueless. And I didn't stand at first, but the second Post Malone went up on stage, I didn't care anymore. I stood up, I sang, I danced, and I had fun. And basically, I realized that all my socializing worries were all in vain because nobody there actually cared about me and nobody was going to remember me. And most of all, nobody was there to see me. Everyone was there to see the artist. Also, when the artist goes on stage, it is not like you're having conversations with whoever is next to you. You're just enjoying the performance. So that is how I started going to concerts alone. And the Role Model concert has so far been the smallest concert I've been to. So it was extremely intimate. And I feel like it is easier to take up space in a crowd than it is to take up space in a small group. And furthermore, it was the first post-Vienna concert, so I was struggling with anxiety in that aspect as well, which triggered my anxiety from before about being somewhere alone. And going there, I didn't know what to do. And when you're awkward, you just don't know what to do with your hands. Do you cross them? Do you move? Do you just leave them hang on your sides? Do you put them in your pockets? They just become this vessel in which you channel your anxiety and awkwardness, and you think everyone can see it and everyone cares. I didn't put a lot of effort in socializing before the concert because I was too focused on facing my fear of being at a concert again. But it was worth it. Over time, I eased into it and then I socialized afterwards. But even if I left not meeting anyone, I still would have had fun. But apart from concerts, when I was in the UK, I also went clubbing alone. And that felt much different at first than going to a concert alone because it is much smaller, it is more intimate, there's social aspects to it, and the etiquette is different. And also, clubbing is usually something you do with people. So what I did was I saw that there was a Harry Styles and Taylor Swift night at one of the local clubs. And I was like, I'll go. Like, I know that if I meet someone, I already have a topic of conversation, because you wouldn't go to a themed musical night if you didn't enjoy the music. So even if I spend the night talking about Fine Line and Midnights, that is okay. And I went there and I was so anxious to go in, and I was contemplating going in. And as I was about to go in, I just like very much considered turning around and going home. But then this girl approached me to ask me about the tickets, and she also was there alone, and we just started talking. So we just stayed together, and then we talked to other people, and I met quite a lot of people that day. Again, I don't keep in touch with any of them. I don't even remember their names, if I'm being really honest. And that should be a testament to how much importance and power we give to others when we don't even know them, and they have no business being in our business. And then another time, I again went to a different club by myself, which, I mean, I wasn't supposed to go by myself, but then like I went to the club waiting for the girl I was supposed to go in with, and she ditched me last minute. She was like, actually, by the way, even though I confirmed 30 minutes ago, I decided I'm no longer coming. And I was like, I walked 45 minutes to come here. I've already bought my ticket. Might as well walk in and just grab something. And before I say this, I want to say that me going to the club alone came with the promise to myself that I will not be drinking any alcohol to the point of being drunk. After all, staying safe should always and forever be your priority, and having mental clarity and sensorial awareness is crucial to staying mindful. So my biggest advice for when you do things alone is stay sober. If you don't know how to drink with a measure, stay sober. Don't take any substances. Be careful. And sure, a beer would help you take the edge off, and it will give you liquid courage. But don't get blackout drunk. Don't lose control of your senses and your body, because after all, you are in a room full of strangers and you need to have yourself to rely on. So please, wherever you choose to go, whatever you choose to do, take safety precautions. Better to force yourself to raw dog the entire experience and everything it entails than potentially put yourself in a dangerous situation. So then, yeah, I went to this club, and again, I was fully alone. I didn't know what to do with my body. I didn't know how to go up to people. I stood in the corner until someone approached me, and I kept on telling myself, I don't know anybody here. And this made me feel so vulnerable. And then I realized, I don't know anybody here. So why should I care about how they perceive me? I am going to live my life, even if this stranger thinks I am weird, because they're not a part of my life. And if they're not a part of my life, why should I give them the power to control my life and how I live it? Why should I and my actions here cater to them? I am here to have fun. This person is here to have fun. And they're having fun. They will not care about me, and I should not care about them. It is all about finding the right dose of nihilism to apply to your approach to life. Because you can tell yourself, I don't know anybody here, and see this as a punishment. Or you can tell yourself, I don't know anybody here, and let this thought set you free. And this ended up being some sort of exposure therapy for me before I even knew what exposure therapy. What? Before I even knew what exposure therapy was. And I was just facing a fear, little by little. And that thing I feared ended up being a way for me to explore sides of me I didn't know existed. And it gave me this immense sense of confidence that nobody could take away from me, because I was starting to become self sufficient in an aspect of my life in which I thought solitude is a detriment rather than something you can benefit from. It helped me with my social anxiety. It did not cure it, but it helped. I started talking to people more. I opened myself to the world because I no longer saw it as me against the world, but as me being a subset of the world, a valuable one, even if a single one. Doing things alone is so extremely important because it shows you that nothing is actually that cheap. And it shows you that a lot of the times your perceptions and your struggles are just in your head. They're real, but most of them are in your head because you go and see that nobody notices you and nobody actually cares. And you can choose to see this as a punishment, but you can also see it as a way to free yourself from the chains that have been holding you back. And how did I notice that nobody cares, you may ask? Because I noticed that I don't care. In the sense that I don't remember what people I saw. I don't remember what every individual person was doing because I was too focused on myself and what I was doing and how I was feeling. And of course, I was too busy projecting my self-perceptions on others and convincing myself that everyone hates me. It took me facing that fear to come to terms with its irrationality. Because the more I have opened up to people and the more people have opened up to me, I see how we are all so focused on ourselves and what others might think of us that we don't have the time to think of others. Because think about it. If you go somewhere and you tell yourself, everyone here hates me, and you keep focusing on this, you're too busy to actually think about others because you're just thinking about yourself and how the others might perceive you. But how you think others think is not always how they actually think, right? No, ultimately, like realistically, it is a projection of what you think. It is what you think they think about you, but you cannot know that for certain. And I can guarantee you that at least 95% of the time, people are too focused on thinking about themselves to actually think about another person in the room. And here's the thing. Growing up in the society I grew up in, I used to see doing social activities, or at least what is commonly thought to be a social activity, so doing this alone, as I used to see it as shameful. I used to think that if you were alone, where people were, you didn't belong, and you were yucking everyone's yum, so you might as well go home and never let the world see your face. The thought of going to a restaurant alone terrified me because I come from a very small town and everyone knows everyone, and people would talk because that was just my town, small town's mentality, my small town mentality. And I would let this get to me and let it make me feel embarrassed. And I used to think there was so much shame in solitude. And now it is something that I very often crave. The problem is that coming here, I tried to impose my small town mentality on my new life. And it took me a bit of time to realize that those are simply not compatible with each other. But I cannot blame myself. I didn't know anything else than my small town mentality. And that is the only community I had lived in. And we are a product of our environment. Also, I was a teenager who cared about what people thought, even though I never admitted it. Because, I mean, come on, you're a teenager. You're so self-centered and you think everything is world-defining and everything is personal. And naturally, you give meaning and power to such arbitrary things. But it takes going through it to realize how meaningless it all is and how mundane it all is. So, seeing a world beyond the world I knew really opened my eyes to new perspectives and beliefs. And I can go as far as to assume that had I stayed in Bulgaria, I probably wouldn't have come to these conclusions because even if I move to a different city and go to the capital, like if I move to Sofia, I'm sorry, but it is not comparable to moving abroad in a different country where you had never even stepped foot before, where you don't know the culture, you don't know the language, you don't know a single soul. This is one of the things that really annoy me so much when I share a struggle that I'm going through as an expat, as an immigrant, and someone who lives in Bulgaria and goes to our hometown every single week, and their family sends them a ton of food every week, so they don't even have to worry about grocery shopping. And then they tell me, I understand you fully. No, you don't. And if you never go through it, you never will. And I'm not blaming you. And I'm not saying that you must move abroad to grow. No, you can grow in the comfort of your own home as long as you're willing to. For me personally, however, it took me leaving to come to these conclusions, to change my perceptions and thought processes. And when I say that people who've never left don't understand me, I'm not trying to judge them because it is a privilege to leave. I understand it. It's not attainable to everyone. And I'm not trying to play a victim here. I am not a victim. Sorry, I'm not a victim. But the realities are just not compatible. They're not comparable. And yes, I know you're trying to comfort me, but you don't understand fully. And I'm not trying to invalidate your experiences, but they're just in a different realm than mine. Because at the very least, even if you're in a different city, but still in your home country, sure, you can experience hardships, you can experience nostalgia, you can experience shocks, and you can miss home, but you're familiar with the culture. And on a very, very basic level, everyone speaks your language. And if you have never had to live in a country where you don't speak the language, I can imagine that it's hard to grasp how important those two seemingly arbitrary aspects of life are. But they are so defining. Anyways, I am again straying away from the topic. So back to doing things alone. So I moved countries alone a couple of times. I travel alone. I could go on and on about the benefits of solo travel, but I won't have the time to today. I promise to do it in the future. I go to concerts alone. I've been to clubs, to parties and events alone. I go to restaurants and cafes and cinemas alone. I go on walks alone. I used to go to the gym alone when I was in the UK. Now I just went back to home workouts because I like them more. And if you told this to 16-year-old me, she would call you a lunatic. But now I cannot name anything more empowering. All of these things, from spending time by myself to going against the grain, going against the norm, made me actually become an integral part of my existence, an integral part of my life. And as self-centered as it may potentially sound, they made me become my own best friend and my closest ally and accomplice. And I have come to perceive myself as the core of my life, which all of this would send 2020 me into a coma because she couldn't bear the thought of spending a single second by herself, or she couldn't even bear the thought of being in her own life. I am so happy this changed because I used to be very obsessed again with the concept of being constant, being set in stone. And I used to put a lot of pressure on people, like by putting them on a pedestal and always burying myself in hell. And what all of this has taught me is that the only constant in my life when it comes to people is myself, because again, I'm the only person in my life who is guaranteed to spend my entire life with myself. And that is when things changed because I decentered other people from my life and I put myself at the core of my existence, which is the thing that set me free from the small town social norms mindset that I grew up with and the mentality which tried to paint a picture of self-respect and self-love as something egoistic and something that's ignorant and something to look down on. There's a lot of societal shame around loneliness, and there's a lot of misconceptions surrounding solitude because it is perceived always as if those things are indicative of you as a person. And what I mean by this is if you are existing in solitude, it is oftentimes perceived as the fact that you're not worthy of relationships or you're not capable of relationships, which could not be further from the truth. There is a lot of societal shame around solitude. I feel like, especially for women, because we are societally expected to be nurturers, givers, that we have to tend to people, and tending to oneself is a lot of times perceived as something that should be done in the shadows. That's something that should be done not in the public eye. There is a lot of societal shame around not having friendships, and I feel like only recently have we opened up this can of worms and opened up the conversation around the difficulties of making friendships, the difficulties of fitting in for the point of fitting in, if there even is a point in fitting in. And I feel like there is a change in the narrative around solitude. I feel like it is something that has been put emphasis on and being prioritized only recently. But I feel like there is a lot of misconceptions still, because the perceptive line between loneliness and solitude is rather blurry, because both of them have been equated to being an outcast. And in society, which again is based on relationships, being an outcast is not what you want to be. Not only because it comes with shame, but also because it comes with actual consequences like mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, and so on and so forth. And I feel like eradicating the shame and switching the narrative is crucial to make the distinction between being lonely and enjoying your solitude, enjoying your presence, and making the conscious decision to spend time with yourself. Because think about it. When it comes to love languages, a lot of talk is centered around how we give love to others and how we receive love from others. But not too much has been said about how we give love to ourselves and how we perceive this self-love. And if quality time can be a way we give and receive love from others, then I feel like it can also be a way we show love to ourselves. I want this episode to serve as a testament that there's absolutely nothing weird and shameful about choosing to do things by yourself, or even if not choosing to, just doing things by yourself, because everything is a social construct and we're all going to die and none of this will matter and we will all be forgotten. And you can choose to see that as existential dread, or you can choose to perceive this as setting you free from the chains of societal expectations. Spending time with myself made me not only love myself, it made me earn my own respect. Because here's the thing, you can love people but still not respect them. Of course, like we can respect people and not love them, but I feel like sometimes respect is more valuable than love, because no matter how much you tell or show someone you love them, if you disrespect their existence, then it all goes to hell. And basically, the reason I earned my respect is because being forced to spend time with myself and later choosing to spend time with myself, I began loving all the things I have done to get myself here and to, again, become someone I love, because I didn't used to love myself. And I didn't used to respect all the difficulties I overcame, all the self-inflicted pain, and all the imposed pain I overcame. I didn't respect all the hatred and all the love I felt. So now I just started respecting myself. And I feel like that would have been unattainable had I not spent any time with myself, because I had a perception of myself that was solely the product of other people's perceptions of myself, because I never knew myself because I never let myself know myself. Now I'm still in the process of getting to know myself, and this is an ongoing process. It's an extremely dynamic process because we people are extremely dynamic beings that are not set in stone. And just being there for myself in this journey of growth and change and acknowledging the fact that I am someone worth loving and someone worth respecting is an extremely validating feeling because let's be real. We are just looking for validation sometimes. And there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong, nothing shameful. But I've said it before, and I'll say it again. No amount of external validation is going to make up for your lack of self-validation. So spending time with myself forced me to validate my feelings and validate my experiences because I came to realize that this invalidation that I was practicing for years on end just ended up being extremely hurtful because it eradicated the humanness within me. And I'm so extremely excited for the future things that I will be doing by myself, from traveling to concert going to hopefully one day being able to move out and live by myself. Now, there is the potential threat of becoming hyper independent, and we can explore this in a future episode because this is a tendency I am also observing in myself. But the thing is, there is so much I can learn from myself because there's no one who knows me the way I know myself. Because no matter how much I explain my feelings to someone, and no matter how empathetic they are, and no matter how similar their situation is to mine, there's just some uniqueness. And me recognizing that uniqueness to my story and embracing it rather than condemning it for being an outcasting quality, quote unquote, is just exactly what I needed to gain confidence, which is something I lacked all throughout my life. I was never confident. I only started becoming confident a year or two ago, and it very much comes and goes in waves. But the thing is, this self-respect I have earned has given me the sense of confidence that I hope nothing will take away ever. And I actually think nothing can take it away because, I'm not saying I will always and forever be extremely positive towards myself, although I really hope that is the case because what is the point of self-hatred? No matter how much I hate myself, I cannot be anyone else. So I either learn to love it and love myself, or I learn to accept it, or I could also spend my entire life in misery. But who wants that? What I'm trying to get at is that this feeling of confidence is exactly what I lacked in my teenage years, because now this confidence has allowed me not only to take up space socially, but take up space in my own universe, because I used to minimize myself, minimize my feelings, minimize my emotions, and minimize my experiences because I never saw them as worthy, because I didn't see myself as worthy. But the more time I spent by myself, the more I'm starting to see the worth in myself. And my housemate often tells me that she admires how I do things by myself. And I have grown to admire this in myself too. And I don't know. I hope you got my point. I just, take yourself on a date. Date yourself. You are your first partner for life. Don't become an accessory in your life. Become the core of your existence. I feel like only then can you perceive yourself as whole. I hope this inspired you to take the first step towards yourself, even if it is daunting or embarrassing. Just try it out. Go to the cinema alone, for instance, if you are anxious because it is dark and nobody's going to see you. And then work your way up to going to a restaurant alone. But don't scroll on your phone while there. Enjoy the discomfort of external silence and internal chaos. Enjoy being you guys. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Let me know how it goes. But until then, stay hydrated, wear sunscreen, and don't support genocide. Bye!